Okay, let's take a look at section 17b.2 and 17b.3, which is continuing with our analysis of organized data and calculating the measures of central tendencies from organized data. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at these two different graphs here. Now I'm hoping that everybody can recognize what the difference of these two are. Of course, this here is going to be a column graph. And because it's a column graph, we know that we're dealing with discrete data. In this case, on the other hand, we're dealing with a histogram, and therefore we are dealing with continuous data. Okay, so given that these are the two different types of data that we have, let's go ahead and see if we can use what is given here to determine what the measures of central tendency would be. Let's go ahead and start off with the column graph here, because this is something that we're a bit more familiar with. Notice that what we need to do is we need to take, okay, well, how many ones do we have? We have one, so that's 1. An easier way to add this up here would just be to take 2 times it by 3, because that's the value of x, and then that's how many times it happens. So that's 2 times it by 3. Plus, then we have 3 times it by 2, because that's the value of 3, and it occurs twice. Plus 4 times it by 1, because the 4 only appears once. And then if we go ahead and divide that by the total frequencies, right, because that's how many numbers that we have here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then notice that what we have here is 7 as well. We can then go ahead and calculate what the mean would be for this particular column graph. Okay, so if we go ahead and take a look at the median, well, again, the median is going to be exactly the same thing that we did before. It is just taking a look at the numbers in order and going backwards this way. So what we know then is that the middle value, again, in this case, is going to be 2. Okay, very simple because there's an odd number of numbers. Now, if we go ahead and take a look at the mode, again, the mode is the most frequently occurring value, and in this case, it's very simply stated as 2 because it occurs 3 times. Okay, now let's go ahead and take a look at the histogram, which is going to actually be the continuous data. Now, notice the difference, of course, is with the histogram, we have no spaces, and therefore what we're talking about is we're talking about an interval. So what we need to do then, in terms of actually calculating the mean, what we need to be able to do, being that any value between 0 and 1, there was only one value between 0 and 1, and that's why this has a frequency of 1, we need to go ahead and actually use a particular value that would represent this interval. And we would need to do that for the same interval from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and 3 to 4. Now, what would be the most appropriate value to choose? Well, being that we're dealing with the mean, you should actually take the middle value of the interval and use that to represent the value for that particular frequency, or for that particular interval with that particular frequency. So notice that what I did here, for the interval between 0 and 1, the average between these is 0.5. and that would then have a frequency of 1. I would do the same thing for the interval between 1 and 2, so I would take 1.5, and I would multiply that again by the frequency, which is 2. Do the same thing for the 2, which is 2.5 times it by 3, and same thing for the interval between 3 and 4, so that's going to be 3.5 times it by 1. Now, of course, I need to then go ahead and divide by the total number of frequencies, and notice that the total number of frequencies, again, is 7. So, what I can do then is I can then go ahead and calculate what I would consider to be the mean of this particular histogram. Okay, now, when it comes to the median, how are we actually going to choose the middle value? Now, we don't have any means at this particular moment to actually calculate that, because we cannot determine what would the middle value be, being that we're dealing with intervals. There's going to be another technique that we're going to have to use, and we'll get to that later in the chapter. Now, with regard to the mode, we can of course go ahead and take a look at which interval has the largest frequency, and of course the interval with the largest frequency is between 2 and 3. Now, if you take a look at this, there should be something that you recognize with regards to calculating the mean, regardless of whether you're dealing with a column graph or whether you're dealing with a histogram, if you're also involving the frequencies. Now, it's the same thing for here and here. Notice that what we're doing is we're taking the value of x and then we're multiplying it by the frequency, and we're doing that for all the different values of x that we have. So what I can do then is I can generalize and say that the mean is actually going to be equal to the summation of the x sub i's. So in other words, those are the values of x, right? In this case, it's 1, 2, 3, and 4. In this case over here, it's going to be 0.5, 1.5, 2.5, and 3.5. And then I'm going to take that value and I'm going to multiply it by its associated frequency. So that's what all of this here is. Okay, that's what that is, and that's what that is here. Now, of course, what we need to do after that is we need to go ahead and divide it by the total frequencies that you have. So I can just go ahead then and talk about the summation of all of those frequencies. Okay? So, regardless of whether you're dealing with a histogram or whether you're dealing with a column graph, if your information is based upon frequencies, then we can always go ahead and calculate the frequencies using this formula here. Of course, you need to take into consideration whether it's continuous or discrete data. With the continuous data, you need to take the midpoint of the interval and use that as the x sub I values. Okay, so we'll go ahead and see if everybody can calculate the mean measures of central tendency from all different sorts of organized data. Okay, and we'll see how you do. And we'll talk about it tomorrow or the next class. Alright, see you later. Bye-bye. Where the factorization